Morning. Thank you so much for joining us. This morning, we got two different presentations within 1 hour, so I don't want to hold anybody up. Let's get started. First, we got the migration conversation, another Preservica update from Utah State Libraries, including Sarah Berry, Andrea Payant, and Darcy Pumphrey. Yes. Okay. Sarah Berry is the digital archivist for Utah State Special Collections and Archives. She is responsible for preserving digital archival and audiovisual materials and improving long-term access through USU's digital collections and repositories. Sarah has a master's degree in public history and a background in international studies. Andrea Payant has been working for Utah State University Libraries since 2008. She is currently the chair of the Digital Stewardship Program and metadata librarian. She holds a master's in library and informational science from San Jose. Her research interests include user search behavior and improving discoverability of archival resources. Darcy Pumphrey is the digital assets librarian at Utah State University Libraries. Her current work focuses on the preservation and continued access of USU's unique and archival digital assets. Pumphrey serves as a member of Utah State's Historical Records Advisory Board. She holds a Master's of Library Science from the University of North Texas, a Master's of Arts in Public History from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and a Bachelor's of Arts in Environmental Studies from Hendrix College. Okay, thanks. And this button says thanks. Thank you very much. Okay, where do I point it? Somewhere like that way. Yes.
It was working.
It's the little arrow button, right?
I had to push the advance the first time yesterday afternoon.
Okay.
Then it worked after that.
Okay, I'm just gonna test it out here. Oh, yes, okay.
There we
All right. So, we're going to talk about Preservica. I'll go over some of the background, and then we'll talk about the soft launch that we've had at our public site. A lot of challenges and some solutions, some of the workflows we're doing, AI and automation, and then our recommendations from our experience. So, I'll get to talking about Preservica, but I wanted to set the stage for what preservation, the situation looked like at USU Libraries. And if you attended our presentation last year at SEMA, and I know you remembered everything I said, but it's just gonna be a refresher. And also I just wanna note that, you know, the things that we've done in the past, it's not to like throw shade at anyone who's ever worked with USU Digital Libraries, digital assets and systems. And we were doing kind of the best with the resources, knowledge, and leadership we had at the time. And yeah, so this background here will just set the stage for understanding our decision to select Preservica as this next big step in our digital preservation journey. So the majority of the digital assets that are the focus of our work in the digital stewardship program are digitized reproductions of archival masters in the archives. And this is what we have scanned in-house or we've outsourced to have digitized by a vendor. And then we have born digital files that are part of the archives. And this is growing exponentially, especially with Sarah Berry as our digital archivist. And of course, you know, those files are huge as far as, yeah, the side they take on. So what started as this digital initiative around the mid-2000s to digitize archival materials and make them available online. It's grown into multiple positions, workflows, platforms, and most notably thousands of digital assets. And these assets represent years of work and resources, and many would be impossible to recreate if lost. Some threats. So, you know, digital assets can face many threats such as storage failure, file format obsolescence, security concerns, and then that gradual data corruption, and they can render these files inaccessible. For a long time, our digital assets were stored on a shared network drive, and this drive was read, write, accessible to many staff members and student employees. And this meant anyone could edit, move, delete, any of the files. And also for a long time, we did not have a system in place to name the files or store them in a structure that allowed them to be easily found. So without that consistent and documented way to name them, it got really messy. And files they also weren't stored in this logical file structure, so they were hard to find in the shared drive unless you had some extensive institutional memory, was basically me. So like Dan just would ask me, like, do we have this scanned? And I'd have to look in like all these different digital project folders and be like, yes, or no, maybe not. I don't know. And then we had no way to know if files were deleted or changed in any way. They could just mysteriously disappear and no one would know. And that of course kept me up at night. And also no way to monitor files for any type of gradual data corruption or obsolescence. And then be able to replace those damaged file formats, or obsolete file formats, with a clean copy. We just didn't have a way to do that. Some solutions. So we can address some of these threats with our current resources. When I started my role as digital assets librarian in 2020, one of my first things I did was work with our library IT to restrict user access to the shared drive. So now most users have read-only access and I can sleep slightly better at night. The files are backed up in 3 different locations with at least one in a different geographical location. And we created and documented consistent file naming, which I talked about at SEMA last year. And we've been applying those to our digital assets and they can be easily identified. They've also, the files that are stored on the drive are restructured in a way that matches the call numbers in archives. So curators can find them on their own instead of having to rely on my institutional memory. But there's still a lot of other threats that we needed to address, which include, we don't really have a clear way to track any changes to the files or deletions, no way to monitor for any data corruption, or replace the corrupt files, or to identify, like systematically identify old file formats and convert them. And no easy way to access the metadata for each file and do batch edits. So, digital preservation at USU has been a journey. For many years, it was like we had digital preservation discussions and monthly meetings of a very large committee. And we all know how that kind of can go. And we didn't have anyone with digital preservation like specifically in their job description, so there's no real ownership over the work. Anything we did kind of took a very long time or would stall out because we all get pulled into our own projects. The committee was also tasked with doing a track audit. So track stands for Trustworthy Repositories Audit Certification. It is kind of an onerous process and a bit dense if you've ever looked at it. And it just honestly felt like we were just sitting there with our wheels spinning. And then to make things kind of stall out even more, the pandemic, of course, that really like kind of just put a halt on anything with digital preservation. But then we hired a digital assets librarian. And now we have a dedicated position for this work, or at that time we just had the one dedicated position for the work. And I decided to do the National Digital Stewardship Alliance, NDSA level of preservation. So I thought that was real simple and digestible and could show us steps that we could do quickly. And it just kind of showed us the next incremental step we could take, do something instead of nothing, and feel good that we were at least doing a few things that were within our resources. And also I did individual interviews with many of the people who had been on that very large digital preservation committee. The general consensus was that people were just ready to move forward with selecting a system because we felt like we were stalled out. So enter Preservica. It's a digital preservation software solution that promises to automatically perform many of the preservation steps we were doing manually or weren't doing at all because of the complexity involved. It promises to ensure the authenticity of our files, and we'll be able to track what happens to the files and how they might change. No more mysterious deletions. Preservica has a multi-step process for requesting and approving deletions and is very hesitant to delete. And then we'll be able to control who has access to specific digital assets and what they can do with them. This was particularly exciting to us as a way to provide user access to restricted access files, such as with the Northwestern ban of Shoshone Nation Digital Archive. These are files that will not be public, but they do need to be accessed by the tribe. So we'll be able to manage that. And then they have this public access feature that Sarah's going to talk about. We're using it to replace Content DM as our way to provide public access to the digital assets that can go online. So why we went with Preservica? With the growth and the number of and complexity of our digital assets, we've outgrown the capabilities of our staff to properly acquire, manage, share, describe, and preserve these assets for long-term use and access. The manual steps in our workflows reach their limit of scalability, and we're not positioned to handle the incoming flood of complex digital assets, such as emails, websites, social media content. The lack of a digital preservation infrastructure was preventing us from responsibly taking archival donations to document the last 25 years. Additionally, this was a big part of it. Library IT does not want to support any open access or in-house solutions that require internal maintenance and resources, because these costs are hard to predict. And some of the features of Preservica to highlight that we like, there's many time-saving automations and batch processes for the digital assets and the metadata. There's a centralized system for acquisition, ingest, processing, access, and preservation. Custom user roles, which I mentioned, for both internal and external users. Then the email, social media, and web archiving capabilities, which we have not gotten to test out at all. Conversion to new file formats, and there's an active community forum where we can communicate and collaborate with Preservica's developers and other clients. And then, so there are additional cost savings for us in moving from Content DM to Preservica for our public access. And we decided it was preferable to work within one system for preservation and access rather than trying to get two systems to communicate and work together. And I will note that we signed up for the professional edition of Preservica. We bumped that. Okay, so it's enterprise?
Enterprise.
Yeah, okay, we're in the enterprise. I should have updated that slide. Yeah, but I think there is no perfect solution or system, and migration is challenging. We went into this with the understanding that there's no perfect solution. What's something that's good enough, and we will run into problems. But these past 2 fiscal years have been more challenging and frustrating than I thought it would be. I think many of us thought it would be. We are making progress, but we are behind, if you can tell, maybe. So one thing we did early on was we assigned each of our digital collections that are in Content DM to a tier, and then we could kind of get the easy ones done first. So tier 1 was like these small collections, so under 50 digital objects. And most of them are named, the files are named correctly, minimal metadata cleanup. They're just kind of easy to just get in there. Tier 2 was larger digital collections of kind of a similar like state of readiness. But then tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, they get progressively more complicated and nightmarish with a lot of different types of cleanup and often very large digital collections. So we're kind of through 1 and 2, sort of.
Yeah.
That's it. But we are gonna go live, even though we don't have the other ones ready yet. Yeah. And I will turn it over to Sarah now to talk about the soft launch of the public access site.
Okay.
Hey, the soft launch, there you go. Oh, everybody, our website's ready. But also, you know, it's a way for people to be able to give us feedback, especially internally. It was really more intended to put it out there, make it live, so that library staff can tell us what they think and what they hate, hopefully nothing they hate, because it's me, right? But also for links, and it really helps us be able to visualize how it's going to look at the end. So soft launch, we made it live in March. And so the last couple of months, we've just been rolling with what we have and trying to fix it incrementally, as we've also on the back end and trying to finalize all the data and get it in into the back end system. There we go. there's some screenshots of what it looks like now. Isn't it pretty? So universal access is what Preservica, the vendor, has been using as that front end portal. So it's using WordPress technology. So it's kind of a WordPress site, but it's completely stripped of any useful anything. So, so, you know, I've had to learn how to code. I didn't know I'd have to learn how to code to be able to make this work, but also it really is important to understand the front end display of how these files are and collections are going to appear to our patrons so they can navigate them. So knowing how it would look would actually inform how we organize them on the back end, how we put them in folders, and how we do the hierarchies, and what we would do internally wouldn't necessarily make sense to a patron. So we've had to do a lot of balancing. How is it going to look? How should it be organized? That kind of thing. So we settled with creating top level collections, which are by curatorial area. So this is kind of how our collections are split up. So we've got, you know, folklore and university archives are just kind of separate. That way everything can funnel into those areas. Also had to create some pages to sort of force patrons to take a pathway to where we wanted them to go. And so that's how we have some menus there that will take them to those collection pages, which I will show you. Oh, actually, this is the collection and item level. All right, let's go back. Here's the collection pages. So this is what they look like. And as we add a collection, we put in a thumbnail that takes you to the collection landing page. And so this just talks a little bit more about each collection. This is sort of just a way to help the patrons find what they're looking for, rather than just, you know, come into the archive and see thousands and thousands of things. They don't know exactly how to navigate it. So that's kind of what we've been doing at the, uh-oh, I can't go back.
Over here, points that way. No?
She's not, that's not. Okay, well, oh, there it is, thank you. So at the item level, this is kind of what it looks like. So when you get into a collection, it's going to put them all here. We can control sort of what metadata shows here, the refining, all the filters, all of that's kind of done on the back end. So it's been a lot of trial and error to figure out exactly how we want things to look. And then the metadata displays up there. So it's still a work in progress. This is what it looks like now. I think it looks pretty good. Here's the item level. This is how it will display. Obviously, it will look a lot nicer on your monitor, but you can zoom in, you can look at the different pages. So this is the front and the back. You can mark it up, I discovered, but hopefully it doesn't do anything permanently. So we're just really just exploring how this functionality will work. That is what it looks like now. Oh no. Okay, so that's not working. There we go. Collections. There's our landing pages. So part of the challenge of creating these landing pages for each of our collections, well, first was deciding which ones we wanted to keep that landing page, maintain that context for the original collection, and then just a way to navigate to these collections, but also the WordPress, the Preservica system required us to redo all of our graphics. So we've had to resize and kind of redesign a lot of our graphics for each of those. So that is ongoing. All right, oh, that's the back end. So in the Preservica system, this is not what the patron sees. This is how we've kind of replicated those top level folders, and that's where we put everything into so that it will display in places we want them to display. Okay, next steps. So is our hard launch, right? We're going to try to phase out content DM by July 1st. So we're just gonna continue doing what we're doing, everything we can, getting it in there and make it fully live. And we're going to do a communication plan with our stakeholders, collection sponsors. This is just to make sure they're happy with any changes we've had to make, if we've had to adapt some of the metadata, or if they, I don't know, we don't change the graphics too much, but just getting their feedback on the overall site, navigating to their collections. And incorporating design feedback. So any of this feedback, you know, comes to me, comes to us, and then I work with our LIT who knows CSS, which I don't. We can try to make it look the way we want it to. And continue to work with our vendor to address technical or other issues. That is also ongoing. Okay, challenges and solutions. There are many challenges. So these were kind of our main ones. If we had to pick 4 major categories, here's our challenges. So working with the vendor, if you work with vendors, there are things that you don't expect to be challenges. So the response time, that kind of thing. We didn't anticipate just how much handholding we would need, I think, in that design process. So we would probably, doing it again, would plan on additional CX hours. File management, again, like Darcy mentioned, fixing some of those file names, structures, maybe in, you know, if we were to do it again, we're not gonna do it again. But if we, if we were, we'd probably want to make sure all of our files and all that hierarchy is established ahead of time. Let's see, web design. One of the big challenges is Preservica is going into a new gen version. So they're kind of phasing out the WordPress into their own. And because it doesn't quite have what we need and want right now, we are sort of straddling 2 different systems. So the new gen and the old gen. So we're going with old gen, but if, you know, eventually down the road, we need to do new gen, we will do that. Again, like I mentioned, the limited functionality of WordPress. Technical issues. So the custom metadata schema, I think Andrea will talk a little bit more about that later. And just really the workflows associated with moving all this information in. Okay. So here are our solutions. You know, it's ongoing. We could probably make a whole presentation on the challenges and solutions. So we're just flying right through this. So support tickets, you know, well, we'll do the best we can. File management, like I mentioned, just kind of adapting it, making sure it's all reviewed before it ingests. So this is how we're managing those types of things. We talk to each other a lot, trying to fix these problems as we go. Web design, so that's, you know, we're working together, working with LIT to try to adapt it and build some CSS. Technical issues, let's see, we're waiting for the functionality to accommodate custom schemas. So we're working with what we have. We've been able to create some schemas that work, and then we're trying to do some automation. So again, this is stuff that Andrea will talk more about. So with that,
That's not working anymore, correct? I'll just.
It's not, but if you just indicate.
I'm already.
Yeah. No worries.
Yeah, she's doing great. So I'll just go over a high level view of the workflows that we've been using to support our migration, and just a note that we anticipate that these workflows will probably remain pretty similar when we just move to post migration. Okay, so file management, yeah, there's the important steps that we take to always review the files. This means we need to check the file names and the formats and clean up legacy file structures, apply the standardized naming conventions. And we look closely at the hierarchies and the access restrictions to make sure that everything aligns with our internal structure and what our goals are for public access. And as Sarah mentioned, we need to map out how this is going to work for the patrons. And so we take that into account now. Okay. Then we move on to our metadata. So we export metadata from Content DM, and these come out as text files. These text files need to be transformed into a whole new schema and into Excel spreadsheets. So that's what that looks like as far as the prep for ingest. We went from a Dublin core base, basic Dublin core, but with tons of modifications, to a very rigid qualified Dublin core schema. So this transition isn't really simple. It takes a lot of normalization and a lot of cleanup. And we used, if you want to just click a couple of times, I've just got some, yeah. There's some cleanup that we use Python for, and I'll go a little bit more in with our automation and stuff in a bit. But a big thing we had to take into account was that everything we exported as metadata from Content VM, it was only for access files. It wasn't for preservation files. So we've had to expand our metadata to incorporate in metadata for preservation files as well. So that was a big thing. But we were also able to add a new field, that we wanted to add before, but weren't able to, which was bibliographic citations. So hopefully this will credit original sources and help discoverability down the road, but this is actually a new field. So, next slide, please. All right, I think you can click it one more time through here too. All right. Okay, so once the metadata is cleaned up, we move on to our ingest. We prep the metadata in the Excel spreadsheets, and then we have to generate these OPEX wrapper files that are required by Preservica. And these are structured XML packages that they link the metadata with the content during ingest. So master files, OPEX files, and metadata are all loaded using secure file transfer protocols. Or if you're lucky and you're not working with a ton of files, there's like a drag and drop way you can do it too in their system. But we do use Python to streamline this process as well. So next slide. Oh, this is just an example of what it looks like. It's got XML files attached to everything. These OPEX files. Thanks. Okay, then we finalize things, we troubleshoot our ingest, making sure that everything loaded correctly and see if there's any other issues. We check for file conversions because that's automated in Preservica for us. And then we start manual workflows if we need to. And then we set our file permissions for any files that need to be made public. All right, next slide. I'll go over real quick our AI and automation. Yeah, next slide. Okay, so automation was super critical so far in our process. So we had a representative from Preservica that helped us create code to create all those required OPEX files, which was very helpful. They helped us build the schema. And then we have a new student hourly position, because digital automation technologist. I had to put his name here because he's done so much work. Ethan, we go.
The White House, the Utah Attorney General's office.
Sorry.
And then also our library IT staff has been helping tremendously. Next slide. I'll breeze through this really quick. So our student, Ethan, he converted metadata into our structured XML spreadsheets with the new schema, and he used AI to help structure that code, and then he debugged it as he went along, but basically made it so we can do thousands of things in minutes. And then he also was able to, next slide, sorry. He went further with his work and he developed tools to match metadata with the files using exact and fuzzy logic. So this helped avoid mismatches and missing files, and it reduced the time spent manually checking those things. And then he created a graphical user interface. This validates and prepares files for ingest, and it makes the whole process faster and more accurate. And next slide. And these are some of the tools he used. ChatGPT is how he created the codes. And then he just used Python libraries for everything else. And then of course he used Excel content and Preservica to do this. Next slide. Next steps really are our updates. So our library IT is helping support this, and they're finding a way to automate those updates. So we're just figuring out a way to retrieve the Preservica URLs so that we can match them with the old ones that Darcy using an API in Easy ID. Next slide. Okay, recommendations. Yeah, confirm that your metadata, schema, and harvesting are all going to be supported by your vendor, because they might not be. Yeah. Clean up your file structures early, use manuals, documentation, and as much vendor support as possible with whoever you work with. Nail down your ingest workflows as soon as possible. Meet regularly as a team and with leadership to make sure you're all on the same page. Expect things that take at least a year, probably more like 2. Just leave yourself a lot of time. And then just automate processes as much as possible. And now, we probably don't have time for questions now, but if you have questions, reach out to us and we will.
I think we have time for like maybe one question, one or two. Yep,
So the collections you're ingesting, are they mostly digitized physical collections or do you have some more digital collections?
It's a mix, yeah, it's a mix.
And does that have the same?
Mostly the
basic workflow?
digitized, right?
You mostly digitized, but they're like the oral histories, things like that are more digital.
And that follows basically the same process?
Yeah. Everything has.
This is probably a basic question you probably addressed last year, but how do you get into Preservica? Are there, if someone is out in the world just Googling, say the name of a person who you have a collection for, or they're on Archives West, or they're on WorldCat, can you get into Preservica, or do you have to be on the university website?
I can answer that. That was, probably an oversight on my part. I should have put a QR code to our website. See, so right now, getting into the Preservica backend, you'd have to have an account. So they would set that up, but if you want to see the front end, the Patreon part, that's just the website only. And so, our existing collection has a banner right now that redirects to the Preservica site. So the public can see it. And so, because it is public and it's out there, Google and different search engines should be able to, find. And, you know, if you were to search for something, it should be able to locate it if it's, that site. So that's the plan.
But yeah, it's so new, you probably won't find it with just a Google search right now. Yeah, it just hasn't been up long enough, it hasn't been linked enough to, and things like that yet, but it is available.
Once those arts are updated, those.
Yeah.
Then the archives website.
Yeah, then there's way to get to it.
yeah. Okay,
You wanna?
yeah, well, I introduced you guys.
Just to make sure the clicker works.
I appreciate it.
So. All right, thank you guys so much. For our second presentation, we have all present papers, again from Utah State. This time, we have Kelly Rovegno. Thank you. Abbie Chesley, and unfortunately, she's not here, but Mara Bingham, she's graduating at the moment, so congratulations to her, wherever she might be at this moment. Kelly serves as the University Archivist and Reference Coordinator in Special Collections and Archives at Utah State. Abbie is currently the University Archives Special Projects Assistant at Utah State University and a Library Assistant at Cache County Library. She is pursuing her MLIS at Emporia State University. Mara is a history student at Utah State University and student assistant at USU Special Collections and Archives, and she's graduating currently. So much, and
It's just like.
oh, there we go. Okay. I'm Kelly, I'm the University of USU. And if I forget to turn a slide, because I'm looking at my own computer, just like wave me down. And remind me. So today we're gonna talk about our work on kind of reprocessing the presidential papers at USU. My Abbie and Mara convinced me to use Canva, so this is a bit of a design change. So if it looks good, my students did it. If it looks bad, I did it. So I oversee the University Archives at USU. Abbie works on special projects, which is kind of code word right now for reprocessing a lot of our collections. And then Mara is a general SDA student, but she's worked on this project for the last about six months. Yeah. For that, here's a quick outline. I apologize. This is a PDF that I got from Canva, so some things got a little moved around. I'm gonna give a quick overview of kind of the project we've been working on, and then we're kind of talk about how we manage this project between, I'm a full-time faculty member, Abbie's a paraprofessional, and then we've had some students work on this project. So managing these kind of bigger projects across multiple levels of staff. Okay, so the remediation project started in 2018, prior to when I was at USU, so I can't take all the credit. But essentially, the issue is kind of
About 25% of UEA materials were online. A lot of that was in library catalog records for published materials like extension publications, things put out by USU, stuff like that. And then 2% had electronic finding aids, actually, I think a lot of which were presidential papers. But most of the description were in paper finding aids, or in the beloved card catalog. And the main access was through the University Archivists, which has a lot of advantages. You get a very, like in-depth knowledge, from one person, but it also makes it harder for a lot of people to do research, if they are not available. So, they kind of wanted to move to, things online. So that included, creating an inventory of the entire collection, so that, materials could be tracked easier, for user stats. And then just the collection be integrated with, Archives West. We use, Archives West is the consortium we use, and then, we're using Sierra, but we're migrating to Folio right now, so that's fun. Just to kind of give you an overview of those phases for the remediation project. Now this is about 2019, 2020, was to inventory and barcode all of my collections, including those kind of individual publications. Oh my God, I'm crazy. Quality control was to then go in and verify, that work in we used Airtable instead of Excel, was correct, before they went on to phase 3, which was creating EAD records and then ingesting those into Archives West, so those could be uploaded into Archives West. And then phase 4 would be spinning off a lot of those EAD finding aids into MARC records, so that it could be both found in the library catalog for those that weren't already in the library catalog, as well as our finding aid database with that. So I was hired in 2021, and so this kind of became phase 2.5. As we started this project, Heather Hasley used to have Heather's job, or Abbie's job. And I think Heather's actually on the Zoom, so if she is, I'll say hi. And so Heather did a lot of the initial work with me. We're trying to make the decision if we should go in and essentially, we called it secondary processing. If you really want to read all the exciting details, we have an article. If we really wanted to go in and do all this work, because it added a lot of hours and address these intellectual and physical control issues, or we just wanted to move forward. And we ultimately decided that we would need to correct some of them, because we just didn't want to essentially put a lot of things that were confusing to patrons. They had either outdated information or it was structured oddly. And so we kind of decided to do this reprocessing on select parts, and that included reorganizing a lot of my collections. What had happened is in hard catalog, it makes sense when it was all paper, is that collections are split across various parts, but when that transferred to online, you essentially had, I think, like, I had the Institute for Outdoor Recreation. It ended up with like 28 collections, like 5 of which were just reports. And so if a patron's trying to search for reports from that institution, they're gonna have a hard time. I had a hard time. So we spent a lot of time consolidating collections of that, and then adding description as needed. We were doing a lot of like MPLP on some of these things. Like if you look at my finding aids, some of them are not robust, nor do they need to be. But for some important ones, including presidential papers, we wanted to add more context. And so that's why that as appropriate is doing a lot of heavy lifting in some places. And then identifying and treating issues with immediate conservation needs. You know, I'm sure if you work with archives, you've seen like the slumped papers, and that's fine. But if it happens for 50 years, then it really curls, or stuff with water damage. So things that needed to be corrected, we ended up doing. So the presidential papers. So I knew when we started, we reprocessed. I have 25 record groups. We did not start with this, but I knew when we got to it, I would want to do a lot of work on this. We've had 17 presidents. We're searching for an 18th. So if you're looking for a job. But as you can see, we have 43 collections for 17 presidents. So we have, some presidents have more collections than they need to be. So we've been consolidating that. That is Jeremiah Sanborn, our first president there. And Elizabeth Cantwell, our former president. We have an interim right now, but it is a major source of essentially USU, Utah, and national history. A lot of these presidents have corresponded with the US government, or sometimes even presidents. I use it a lot in instruction. It's popular in exhibits. And also, we've had a lot of students come in when they need to do like capstone projects, right? USU history is a nice one because it's local. There's a lot of information on that. And so it's heavily used, and how it was processed before was certainly workable, right? It was used heavily. But it could be hard to navigate. The description could be confusing. And so I wanted to kind of address that by going through and doing a lot of the secondary processing of that. With that, I will hand it off to Abbie. Okay, so when we started specifically the presidential papers projects, we identified three main issues. So we have the physical preservation issues and the arrangement and description issues, and we'll get to the project management in a minute, but we're gonna focus on the first two. Obviously, we've all seen this. It's lovely, it's great. We won't spend too much time on it. It did represent a significant amount of my time. You know, it's over and it's done. My favorite was our rusty boxes. Okay, so as Kelly talked about, we had 47 collections for 17 presidents. Some of them, one collection for each of them, that makes sense. As you get lower and lower, you can see we have some issues here, 8 for one president. We'll look at his a little bit more specifically. And there wasn't necessarily any issue with multiple collections per president. The larger issue is that it's mostly correspondence. So you'd have correspondence addendum, correspondence addendum to the addendum, and it was just a little confusing. So this is our lovely, I think it's 11th president, Glenn Taggart. As you can see, this is all of his collections that we had. There's a lot of repeats. We have inauguration addendum, correspondence, general correspondence, lots of miscellaneous, our favorite word. And we took those and we split them into two. He's one of the only that ended up getting two so far. Just because he had a significant amount of papers post his work at USU, so that's where this professional and personal papers comes from, but these generally are quite large. I don't know if you guys can see this is 126 boxes for one collection, and the other one is about 16, it seems. So that is kind of the first major issue with the arrangement description, which is multiple collections per president. The second one is, there's a lot of problems with the finding aids that we talked about there. They made sense when they were card catalogs, but frequently it's a little bit hard when it's all item level to find anything. And I found a lot of them had these lovely typed inventories in the beginning of a box that I'd have to find. Sometimes it would be moved, so not always easy. And we'll take a look at this closer so you guys can see what they look like. So this would be the online Archives West finding aid. As you can see, this is the same title repeated for all like 18 boxes. But then you look inside the box and we have a file level inventory of information that we had no idea was there. So we would take that. I think this is the example from that collection, that we would build a hybrid collection where we would do box level where it was appropriate, file level, whereas we're appropriate because we wanted to preserve the amount of work that had been done to make file level. It's a waste not to. And that did mean that we did a lot of like intellectual arrangement, just because so many of these are large quantities of boxes. Moving them around would be a lot more work than is probably worth it. And that leads me to, I think this is the last one, a lot of unnecessary levels of description. This was kind of my favorite thing about this project, was painting series upon series called correspondence, and then just M continued for lines and lines and lines. It was great. And I just made a little example of what this box became, which was just A to M instead of every single file being listed. So this is just a quick overview of what we talked about. And then I'll hand it over to you. So as I mentioned, this was something I wanted to do, right? But there's only so many hours in a week. And so, this is, the pre-processing has been even prior to when Abbie took the position. I've worked with a professional to do that, and so kind of how to manage, that, especially when they don't work full time. And so, this is what we're just gonna quickly talk about. I'm gonna kind of talk about roles and responsibilities, and then Abbie, and then with Morrison, we're just gonna talk about like how we kind of go up that work, and then how that even works like in this physical workspace, and making sure like we're all on the same page. Sorry for sounding a little corporate there. So essentially what the roles and responsibilities. So Kelly, that's me. I hate when I'm the third person. So I'm directing the project. Oftentimes I can tell Abbie, like, I know this has, 10 billion different collections, I'd like it to be one. And then Abbie's the one like opening up the finding aid and we talk about like what those levels of description are gonna actually look like. I can kind of provide context for materials, because sometimes, collections are weird or odd for, let's say, institutional reasons. And then, identifying importance. I mentioned Abbie did a lot of work on the library records, which are important internally, but most patrons do not really, are not doing research on library politics circa 1990. So we did like box level or even just collection levels for that. So kind of deciding what gets us more attention than other things. And Abbie's doing is compiling those inventories in a space. Usually she'll kind of come up with a arrangement and then I'll prove it.
Okay.
And is updating all the description in a space. He's also looking for mistakes, spelling, typos, or just we sometimes find weird things in the front matter. And to increase discoverability with that. And then Mara is the one actually opening every box, making sure the folders are what they say they are, because sometimes the finding aid, those paper ones you saw said, and what the actual file is not correct. And isn't making any corrections and updates to those, and is kind of doing very like high level preservation things. So like removing staples or paper clips when appropriate. I'm not removing staples for everything. And then identifying any questions, especially with like stuff like grandma or anything like with privacy related. And then I would go in and kind of look at those.
So when we first started the presidential project, it was just me working on them for a long time, and then we had our lovely student Mara join, and she seems like a wonderful candidate to work on this project. So we got her on. I'm sad she can't be here. She is the mind behind our beautiful presentation. So shout out to Mara. But because I only work about 20 hours a week, and I don't often overlap with Mara, I don't necessarily get to talk to her frequently. So we need to develop a way for us to communicate about the boxes and have her leave me questions where I can see them. And so we developed this where we have a digital spreadsheet. This isn't where the final product comes from. It's very like, we work on it. I see what she's doing. She's leaving me notes. She's letting me know when things have been updated, when they haven't been, if she's seen them or not. And we kind of work from top to bottom and we meet in the middle. So, and then we have a physical space. This is my cubicle. It's a little messy. But we have a spot for her to leave boxes. You can't see the messy part in the picture, right? But we have a physical space for Mara's leaving boxes, sometimes with sticky notes. And then we try to meet up when we can to talk about stuff. And then I'm just gonna quickly talk about, because this was kind of, at least the draw for part of this project, to talk about how, as a paraprofessional who's not working very many hours, I'm managing a project of this scale. So me and Mara talked a lot about the challenges, obviously the workspaces and the workflows. Because we need to be able to do it asynchronously. And I want to be able to track the changes and progress over time. So I could see what had been changed, because at some point we had other students working on it. Mara was the student who worked on it the longest. So I wanted to know who had worked on what. So if I had a question, I could go to them and ask. And I also wanted a central location for questions and notes, because I would leave myself notes there as well. So I could remember what I'd done. And let's see, then time management, obviously we wanted to balance between how much time we were taking processing, how much time goes into the arrangement of it. I generally about like when we're 90% done with the project, we'll start cleaning up the front matter of the collection, taking what's already been written, making it look a little different sometimes I keep it the same. And then the other challenge was being able to set parameters. Kelly kind of talked about that. How far are we taking the preservation efforts? What's MPLP gonna look like? And the one that Mara brought up to me specifically was the state and federal privacy laws, because that can be kind of confusing for people. And what we came up with is that we both developed some lovely opportunities from this. Mara got to learn a lot of processing skills and arrangement description in some ways. And the big one for me is that I got to manage a project and in person, first time. It was very exciting. I liked it. But then, I mean, the biggest part is that we got to do a collaborative work environment between the three of us.
So, why are we doing all this work? One, this has made my job, I wouldn't say like easier, but I have a lot more material to pull from, right? We work at university, and even if you don't, you're always trying to like do I call it the razzle dazzle. To your patrons, whether they be the public, students, donors, and sometimes you need like flashy things, right? If I pull out like the correspondence about academic changes, people are gonna fall asleep, but if I'm like, look, here's a signature from, one of the first ladies, or like a telegram from President Truman, like a lot of students don't see telegrams, so the research value may not be there, but it's something flashy to get people interested, and then you can introduce them to like bulletins on dairy production in Cache Valley. And we've all, if you work in archives, I'm sure you've seen like just the boxes of receipts, and it can be a lot to go through those. But for collections like this that are at the very high level, we found some very unique things in there. So it just has kind of those stories that you can pull out when you're teaching, and you find more unique items that are good for one shots, or we've also used it in more kind of longer instructions. It's also helped us establish a framework for working on kind of the secondary processing. We work in university, we have student workers, they graduate rudely, they get other jobs in their field. So the staff is always, turning over, and that's, even if you don't have students, if you have paraprofessionals, they may get other jobs, or people come and leave, so just making sure those like core functions are documented. And that this project can continue because it's been going on for a while now, even as people come and go. And it's also kind of created a flexible model for collection stewardship of the collections. Right, I'm not doing, the presentation on library collections, which I'm sure we'll get to. But not every, collection needs this level of detail, where others do, and so it kind of gives us a nice range of that for the process of that. So, and that's Jeremiah Sandwich. So thank you. Are there any questions?
Does anybody have any questions for our lovely presenters?
If you were to start this project over again, is there anything you would change?
If I could a time machine and go back to like 1967, maybe. I think we've, when Heather and I were working on this, Heather Housley, who's now a processing archivist. This took some time to work out, like, what does it mean to do a lot of reprocessing? And we certainly probably processed things more than we needed to in certain collections, and other ones, I'm like, I was looking at one the other day, I'm like, oh, we should go back and do this, right? But I think a lot of people who work in information management kind of have that. As you develop these workflows. So I think we've developed the workflows with the resources we have for now. There's nothing like that. I stay up at night, I'm like, I regret doing. But just making, developing those, workflows, I think is good.
I wish that I'd spent a little bit more time at the beginning documenting what I had done. Just because sometimes I would get to a different collection or farther in a collection, like, oh, something like this had already happened, and I wish I'd written down what I'd done instead of trying to remember and find it. So I guess just documenting, especially like if, as Kelly talked, we want to document what we're doing so that in the event there's new people, they can pick up what we have done.
Have you seen any like major changes in either like online discoverability or like reference questions or things like that? Have they've gotten cleaned up, have they been more, we've been able to see they've been more usable?
On the finding aid data, I can say that E.G. Peterson, he was the longest serving president at USU for 30 years, that's our most, like, besides football and basketball, that's our probably most popular collection, and that might just be me going like, I need something to teach. But I think I've seen, at least with the numbers, I've seen some upticks in the finding aids. I think it's with students, it's a little more, it's easier for them to use those collections. It's also me suggesting they use those collections, so it might be a little chicken egg situation there. But I think it's kind of improved those, like the availability to.
Not a question, I just have to say thank you for talking about this because it's something that I'm also dealing with. I have this horrendous chunk of faculty governance records that have 99 individual MARC records and as many resource records because they catalog every individual catalog card in 2003 when we needed mark records for everything. So thank you for talking about this, because it makes me feel better. I think my Office of the President Records has like 60 different mark records, and they're not even really broken down into presidents. It's just Office of the President, and they all have different resource records, and it's a disaster. It's Board of Regents are the same way. So I feel you, Kelly. Feel you.
A lot of work, and it's one of those, I'm like, well, I guess we'll just have a job.
But it's worth it.
Yes.
Because access has gone up to the stuff that I have worked on, so keep at it, because
Yeah.
this is impactful, this is important. And so,
Should we open the floor up to more questions about Preservica? Because I know you guys got cut off a little early and we have a couple more minutes.
Questions here.
Nothing's come up.
Yeah.
The Mara just went in.
That's true.
It was like a pretty woman and she put it.
Who's your favorite president?
I'm an EG girly.
Lead all the way.
Yeah,
Team EG.
I'm partial to Chase. I liked reading the drama of him flying around the world.
You do?
University budget.
Yeah, did you have a question?
Question, Darcy, now, the student developing becoming a coding, is that what's gonna be tools that can be added to math vision?
Yeah.
It used to be, when you work in the archive long, and you get somebody that's really clever and then bring those things and next week streamline that, like,
Yeah, he's doing a good job about documenting everything that he's done, but he jokes that he's going to automate himself. Like, he won't even be needed anymore, but yeah, he's done a good job, and he's making sure that the tools can be used on Macs or PCs, I mean, so that it's really functional for whoever might be studying it.
And so that IT, someone who has more
Yeah,
technical knowledge in us can also go in and like correct anything as the system changes and maybe a little bug in the code or something. Yeah.
And we also try to cross-train, so, there's more than one person who knows how to do the ingest and use the Python libraries. So, I've done it on my Mac and you've done it on your PC, so that way the knowledge isn't completely lost.
and I think it's the graphical user interface that he built. It would be a tool that anybody, it's like an executable file that anybody can use on there. So,
We did have one question come in from Zoom. Did you run into any screen reader accessibility issues with Preservica?
Yeah. Yes.
I think it's equivalent to the same issues that Content DM has. It's pretty much the same. We did have our accessibility, librarian, he's not an accessibility librarian, but he's in charge of that, and he has looked at Preservica for us and given us some recommendations. But we haven't gone into detail about how we're going to deal with them. But yeah, if you're familiar with any of the issues that Content DM has, it's pretty much the same thing you get with Preservica. No solutions there.
Wonderful. Well, we are at the end of our time, so I will release you all into a while. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for.